Hey guys, it's Robin, Arizona Crafts, and welcome to my holiday craft room. It's Friday in December, so we are still working on some ornaments. And today we are going to try playing with a little bit of felt. I thought we'd start with some mitten ornaments. Now when I was planning on which ornaments to make throughout this month and going into next year, I was trying to come up with something new and inventive and creative, but then I kept seeing the same projects over and over again online, and every time I thought, oh, I can make that, well, there's 12 tutorials already for that. So then I thought, well, I'm just going to forget about all of that, and I'm just going to do what I do. I'll show you how I make these ornaments, and hopefully I won't be saying the same things over and over again that all the other bloggers and YouTubers have already said. So the first thing I needed to do is decide what shape I was going to make for my felt ornament this week, and I decided on the mitten. I just really enjoy the way a mitten looks. You can use some nice fun colors of felt. Oops, you caught me. I didn't put my hanger on yet. And you can combine different ones. Like this one, I went ahead and I put a cuff on. And this one I didn't. This one is plain. This one has embroidery. This one is flat. This one is stuffed. So anyways, I decided on a mitten. So then my next step was, how am I going to get this design? I could just draw a mitten on a piece of paper. It's a real simple shape. It's not that hard to just sketch out and just change a little and erase as you need to and draw that out. Or you can use a cookie cutter. That's how I got this smaller shape. I had a cookie cutter, so I traced around that for my mitten. Now, if this is the only size you have, you can always just add a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch and draw around it and still end up with a larger mitten. You can draw it on paper and scan it into your computer and enlarge it. Or you can just do a little Google search for the coloring books or other different types of ornaments. So this is the small one that I traced. I traced this on file folders. In one of my previous jobs, one of the offices were just throwing away a box of these file folders. So I thought, well, I'll take those. I had this plan of organizing my files and keeping everything neat, but that went right out the window. But I do use it for making stencils. So I just picked it, you want to save on your file folder. You don't want to just go ahead and waste it all. So I picked a spot over towards the edge, and I went ahead and I traced around it. What I did is I've had a little bit of experience of tracing around things before. If it needs to be an exact size of something, like if you're tracing someone's hand for a glove or mittens that you're going to sew, you want to really get the right size. But for these, I didn't want to trace straight up and down like this, especially because I have a weird shape of the pen here and all that. So what I did is I went around and I just held my pen to the side and I traced around it like this at an angle. And that way I got a nice even amount, because when I've done it before going like this, sometimes it gets a little off, or you don't get into these little indents here very well. So I find if I hold my utensil, my pencil and my pen at an angle, I can go ahead and easily trace around it. Then I took out my non-good scissors, my paper cutting scissors, and I just cut out the template. And that's how I got this one. Then I did a Google image search for a free clip art mitten, and I found this one, and this one had a separate piece for the cuff. Now, if you only found a mitten like this, or like this one, and you wanted a cuff, you can always enlarge this a little, and then just trace off that section and cut it off if you'd like, and then you can have a cuff for the top of your mitten, and that way you have a nice little contrast cuff. So I have my mitten, I have my mini mitten, I have my cuff, and then the next thing I needed to decide was my colors for my felt. So the one I'm going to show you how I cut out is, I'm going to go ahead and use this orange felt because my oldest loves orange, so I'll make a little mitten for him. So I'm going to make one with a contrasting cuff. So I'm going to take my piece of felt and I'm going to fold it. This just happens to be a scrap piece of felt. If you had a full sheet, you can fold that in half. I generally just pick up my felt at Michael's and Joann's. Joann's has this, is this Conan, I believe? This is Kunin, Kunin felt. It's a recyclable, it's a recycled and recyclable felt. It's Eco-Fi. I really like this felt. It has a nice softer feel to it than your regular acrylic scratchy felt. This one I believe is just your regular Michaels kind. Here's a gray I picked up. See how it's not really stiff. You can almost see through it a little bit. It's got a nice soft feel to it. This stuff, it's a little flimsy, not flimsy, I should say. It's a little flexible. You can kind of see the light through it a little bit. This may be from the same company. I'm not 100% sure. But sometimes, you get that felt. They have stiff felt, but sometimes even this regular felt can be a little stiff. So just find something you like. Make sure, if it feels nice and soft to the touch, if that's what you like, and grab that. So I went ahead and I just will go ahead and fold it in half so that I want to make the front and the back at the same time, because I have a front and back to my mitten that allows me to, this mitten, I wanted to go ahead and put maybe a candy cane or a couple coins in it or a little something or another. It's small. You can't put too much in. But this one also has a front and back, and it allowed me to stuff it. Now, as you notice, this one has embroidery on it, but you can't see it from the back. So all the stitches are on the inside. So that's why we want to have double the felt. Now this one I can fit on here like this. Now you could trace around it, but then you'd have to make sure whatever you use to trace around it, you won't be able to see it, or you put it on the inside when you cut it out. Because a lot of times when you trace on felt, you can see the ink because it never really comes all the way off when you cut it. Another trick would be to trace this on freezer paper, iron the freezer paper onto your felt, and then trace around it. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my little binder clips. And I have a nice pair of sharp scissors. These are, I call my batting scissors. I use them to cut batting all the time because they have a nice flat bottom. So when I'm cutting the extra off, when I'm trimming down my quilt, this works really well. But it has a nice serrated edge on it, and it cuts through the felt really nice. And these scissors cut all the way to the tip. A lot of the times when I have just basic craft scissors, they don't cut all the way to the tip. So with these, I'm just going to go ahead and roughly cut around my shape, so I don't have to worry about all this excess hanging around. Now I saved this whole piece. If you come back on Sunday, I'll show you how I store my felt, whether it's the larger pieces or the smaller ones like this. I'm going to cut that small piece off. That's going to go in my small bin, and this I'll keep in my large section. Because something small like this, when we go ahead and make snowmen, we can get a couple noses out of this, probably about 3 or 4 orange noses for our snowmen. So that's why I like to go ahead, you know me, I save scraps of everything. So for my mitten, I found that I like to I hold my scissors and try not to cut through my cardboard stencil here. Now I'll just add another binder clip. Sometimes you have to move them out of the way. I just want them to hold my 2 pieces of felt together so that as I'm cutting around, I'll get about the same shape. Now if it's a little bit off after I stitch it, I can go ahead and trim it down. But I just trim the best I can. Felt is pretty forgivable, but if you were to trace this out and you could just cut right on the line a lot easier than this, or if you had the freezer paper on there, you can just cut along on that. But I was trying to see a different way and to avoid having to go through those extra steps. And I wanted to just see if this would actually work, and it does seem to work pretty good. Now maybe if I was doing something like a snowflake, something that's really intricate, that has a lot of different grooves that go in and out and stuff, it might not be the best. But for this mitten and maybe for like a stocking or something, it goes real easy. It's one last little piece. Felt is kind of good. You can just pull that little extra piece and then just cut the strings that come with it. Remove my clips. Now all these pieces, I have not come up with a reason to use these except for maybe to stuff them inside of something. So these right now have been going in the trash. And then I have my front and my back of my mitten. And do the same thing with my little cuff. I only need one, so I'm not even going to worry about putting any binder clips on it. Just make sure when I move it around, I line it back up. Quick and simple. Now this will go on here. There is a right or wrong side and a top and bottom. Sometimes you just flip it around to where you get it that it looks like the way you like it. Now for my purple mint, I took this over to the sewing machine and I used a gray thread, and I decided I want a little bit of a contrast. On just the front piece, I sewed my contrast cuff on, and then I put these two together, and I should have put my little ribbon hanger. If I'd have put it in there, I could have stitched it down. Now I'll just have to put it in here and do a couple hand stitches to have the little hanger. Now I could go without a hanger. If you make these a little bit larger, you can put utensils at a dinner table. You can put a knife and fork in there or something. Even with the hanger on, the people can go ahead and take this home afterwards, and they'll have an ornament as a remembrance of the dinner party. You can take a marker and write their name on here. They have those glitter pens that you can write with, or you can hand embroider it however you like, or just leave it plain like this. Sometimes if you want, you just put an initial. If you really don't want to put a name, you can always tuck a little tag in here that has their name so they know that that's where they're going to sit at the table. But after I put that on and I put the two together, and then I just went back over the edges and I just stitched all the way around the edge. Now if I decided that my stitching was nice and rounded, but see how these are just a little bit ragged, I can just go through and trim this down. It's just felt. Other than everyone watching, nobody's going to know that I got a little bit jagged on my edges when I was cutting it, or that I didn't stitch exactly 1/8 of an inch away. And I can go ahead and trim it down. See, maybe I don't like this purple sticking up here at the top. Now I made a bit of a mess, and I have a little bit of confetti here, but otherwise, I think my stocking looks pretty good. See? If you used a matching thread instead of a contrast, it would just sink right into the felt, and you wouldn't even see it. So once I put this on, I will have one ornament done. Now this time I just used a little small one from the cookie cutter, and I thought, well, FSU, Florida State University, their colors are a burgundy and gold, or maroon and gold. I'm not sure exactly which way they color it. But I thought, well, that would be fun. I could always send this to my niece who went to college there. I just made some random X's across the top through just the front piece. I didn't mark them or anything. As you can see, they're a little bit uneven. I didn't want anything to be exactly perfect because I thought it would be easier to make it a little rustic. And then I just put a couple little X's in various spots over here. No big deal. I just wanted to go with an odd number because they say odd numbers look better than even. I tied a knot in my embroidery floss and I stuck it inside of here. And then all I did was whip stitch around. And I'm going to show you how I whip stitch around that in just one moment. And then there's my hanging loop. You can attach this to a present just as a little add-on. These are generally thin enough that you can put it in a Christmas card and mail it away. Now here in the US, your card needs to be less than 1/4 inch. I've ordered a tool from Etsy. Someone has one of those 3D printers and they printed out a special mail slot thing so you can put your card through it to make sure it's the right size for the first class mailing. So I would show you how thin this is, but I haven't gotten it in the mail yet. I believe it's coming from Canada. So between the Canada Post and the fact that anything international takes a little longer and it's Christmas, I haven't received it yet. So here's another one that I made out of the cookie cutter. So once again, this is the small size. And I think this works out really nice for an ornament. It's about 3 inches tall, and maybe about 2.5 inches wide at the widest point here. I'm going to show you how I whip stitch together, and then on the next stocking I'll just show you how I made this little decoration in the center. Now you could do a buttonhole stitch along the edge, But sometimes I have a hard time getting it look nice and having the edges all line up evenly. And I just kind of like the rustic look of the whip stitch. As you can tell, I like things to be not perfect. I like it a little bit more random. I want it to be known that, not that, oh, this isn't ugly and I didn't take my care while I made this handmade object, but it's also not made by a machine. It's made by a person. I try to keep them about even. I just go in about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and then I just pull my floss. I am using 3 strands of a white floss. I like to keep my thumb just about where I want it to go, and the same thing with my finger on the back. That way my needle runs along my finger, and my thumbnail here stops it from going too far into the mitten. And that's how I'm able to keep it at a reasonable... It's not perfect, it's not exact stitching all the way around, but it's close. It's not going really jagged in and jagged out. I'm not exact all the way along, but like I said, I'm okay with that. If you need to be exact, you can go ahead and do that. And then when I get to the end, I just go back up through the same area. I'm going to tie it off. And then I'm just going to stick my floss in between the front and the back. Pull it through, just like we do every other time that we're burying a thread. Try not to cut off my hanger. Just give this a little extra pull so that when I snip this, it's going to suck it right back inside my mitten and we won't even see it in there. I think with a little help, even a child can go ahead and work on projects like this with you. They can stitch around with this if they're maybe 4 or 5 years old and up. You could put a little bit of glue on here and just glue them together. You could, after you get it all stitched together, you can use the glitter glue or some type of a marker or paint pen or something and draw on your designs like this. They don't have to actually embroider on it. Or you can just have a plain mitten like this. It doesn't even have to have any design on the front. I thought it would be fun to add just a little bit of something to the front. I take all 6 strands of embroidery floss. I'm going to use white so we can pretend like it's a snowflake. I tie my overhand knot on the end. And the hard part is always just getting it onto the needle. I went and bought some new needles, so these have a little bit larger of an eye, so that wasn't too hard to do. This is my Friction pen that disappears with heat, so I could draw my design on if I want. I can kind of give myself some guidelines. I could use a little bit of maybe some chalk or something. Ooh, the ones that disappear in the air or with water, or I can just go ahead and freehand it. It depends on how particular you are and how much your OCD is going to allow you to just freeform it. If you look at this, this is basically just a cross with an X, and then I put colonial knots all around. You can use beads instead if you wanted to, but I thought with this project I would just stick with the embroidery floss. You could also do the X first, but if you put these long stitches on top, they tend to be a little loose, and I like the X to just hold these down. So let's put this one down, just put it down a little lower just because. Felt is very easy to stitch through. If you want, you can measure this one so you make sure your other one is exactly the same size. There's a lot of room here for being very particular on how you want your stitches to look, or you can also go freeform. But you want to make sure that you're not pulling it too tight. You want to have it loose. I'll just push it up with my finger back here to make sure. Hold it here, give it a little bit of a tug there. Then I'm going to come over and make my crossbar about the same length, height and width as the last one. Once again, I'm holding here and I'm holding with both fingers there just to kind of give me that tension I need on the felt while I'm putting it through. So now there's my basic cross. And I like to make my X not out as far, maybe halfway or 3/4 of the way from my crossbar here. Sometimes your threads might loosen up a little and come unspun. Then about the same distance over there. Now I can look across from here, and I can look down from here and kind of eyeball where that next bar of the X has to go. And I'll come to the back, and I'll just go ahead and tie this off before I do my little colonial knots. If you need to see how to do the colonial knots, there's a tutorial I'll pop up in the iCard for you. And that'll just keep this from having any problems, because as I'm doing my knots, I'm going to go around in a circle, and this way nothing will come loose from either area. Now you can put your knot directly on top of your little snowflake stitch, or you can leave a space. This time I'm going to go ahead and leave a space so that we can see what it looks like. Sometimes it's easier just to set it down on the table so I can get my knot going. And I'm going to go to the top. That way I have that extra little space on top of my snowflake. And that might be a little bit further away than you might like. But I can go ahead and bring that top down a little bit. Try to make this one about the same distance. There's my colonial knot. Tighten it up just a little bit. I think I might like it. Closer to the little snowflake than this far apart. But you never know until you try something how you're going to like it. I could easily just go ahead and cut after that first knot. I could have cut my floss and changed it, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. Because it's not all about me, because maybe someone else might like it a little bit further away like that. Sometimes it's hard to get it to land exactly right on top, so you might need to leave just a little bit of a space. Okay, then I'll just tie this off. I'll go under a couple of these and make a little knot. This is a Christmas ornament. Now granted, it is felt, so the little kids can actually play with these without you having to worry about them being broken. I don't think that's too bad. I just think I would prefer them to be a little bit closer. I do like to have that little bit of orange in between, so maybe if I went half that distance, I'll just so it's just beyond the little strands of that snowflake or a shining light. Or I've seen it in different circumstances called different things. Whoops, maybe I should put it actually on the front of the stocking, of the mitten. Now once again, you can go ahead and just glue this down. You can tack this down separately if you want to leave it open to put a little treat or a candy cane in, because a candy cane, those little smaller candy canes will fit really nice in there. You want to go ahead and stitch this on first. You can machine sew it, or you can still even just hand sew it in a running stitch along here. And then together like that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this part down in white, and then I'm going to stitch the actual mitten in orange, but I want to stuff this one like I did this one. I went ahead and dropped down to just 3 of the strands of the embroidery floss, so I basically just cut it in half. And I think I'll go ahead and maybe I'll do running stitches around this outside instead of whipping it, so it'll be like it was machine sewn, but it won't be because it's hand stitched. And I think instead of doing back stitches, I will do a running stitch, and that just means I put my 1 stitch. So as a running stitch, I'll start with my 1 stitch, and then I'll skip a space on the back that's about the same length as that stitch. I know it's a little bit hard to see in the white, but you see how I have a stitch there and a stitch there, and then I'll just come up and work my way this way. Felt does have a little bit of forgiveness, so if you cut this a little bit short, you can give it a little bit of a stretch. You can hold it in place with pins. You can still put a little dab of a glue stick on here maybe. I wouldn't do too much on the felt, especially with the white, because it tends to bleed through with like an Elmer's glue, and you can see the round circles from where you glue things. See if I can do this like this. This is the sewing version versus the poking, pushing, and pulling it through, and you can get a couple extra stitches. The only problem with this is sometimes it's hard to get it even, especially when you're coming back up from the back. Sometimes those stitches get to be a little bit larger. You just have to be careful. So if the sewing version doesn't work for you, you can go right back to the stabbing. If you were to embroider someone's name on it, you would want to do it before you stitch this down. That way any of the threads from here would be hidden between the white and the orange. Unless you were planning on stuffing it, then you can go all the way through and you won't have to worry about any shadowing of the threads coming through here. Now I, of course, will probably run out of thread as usual. But since I'm going to stuff it, it'll be okay because the knots will be on the inside and you won't see them. I might make it. Sometimes you put your needle through and then you rethread it when your thread is just a little too short. The only problem is it gets a little harder to catch all 3 strands. You can pull it through and then just tie it off a little bit to the actual felt. Once again, this is going to be on the inside of my mitten. I know, it would have been easier just to get a longer piece and I wouldn't have to deal with this, but there. I can do it. I'm stubborn, I can do it. Even though it's going to be in the inside, I tend to just trim things down. Okay, so I have that hand stitched around just like you'd probably see if you were wearing this as a regular mitten. Now I need to go find some orange thread to match this. So I went to my floss supplies and I found this orange that looks pretty good to go with this. It's not an exact match, it is just a hair lighter, probably a shade lighter. And this is number, I don't know because I didn't always mark my flosses and I don't even know if this is DMC brand. Because like I said before, I tend to buy a lot of the big packages when I first started doing embroidery. And I used, I get a Michaels coupon and then buy their generic Iris, I believe it is, brand. And you can get your floss really cheap that way. Now I'm going to do a little stuffing on this one. So I think I'm going to leave my top open. But to make sure that it goes easy enough for me, I will put a binder clip in to hold my top. I like to hold anything that sticks out. So maybe my thumb. Even it up a little and pop it here. Now okay, you're gonna think it's crazy, but I put a bunch on to start with. Then I decide where I'm stitching, and sometimes I remove them, and sometimes I leave them there. So I think I'll just go ahead and start stitching. I don't want it to actually show on this white part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sneak underneath it, because I still need to close this off and have these parts. See, I just tucked the tail in there so it doesn't pop out. I need to have this part stitched together because I'm going to put the stuffing in, but I don't want it to go through the white because I have the white floss there. So I can still do my running stitch. I just definitely need to do the poke and stab version and not the sewing version, so that I can come up underneath that cuff. And I won't have to worry about it showing. These are good little projects when you're getting snowed in, or it's a rainy day, or it's too cold to go outside. You can make any type of ornaments throughout the year. You don't have to wait for the Christmas season, right? You can let the kids work on them. Maybe they can draw a little mitten design for you, or you can give them a marker to write their name, or they can put the year on it. Some of the younger kids might not be able to do the floss. I think definitely in kindergarten, I know my kids could do the overhand stitch with the floss. It might not have held the stuffing all that well, but it did make for some fun ornaments. And they were able to make them themselves, so they were handmade by them. And I really like just having those on the tree. Sometimes that's the only ornaments I put on the tree. In other years, I might want only, maybe I just want to make it a certain color tree and I only want certain colored balls on it. But I like to have at least one tree in the house that has just handmade ornaments on it. Even if it's only a little 2 or 3 foot tree. Maybe if I'm going around these corners, I might not be able to do the stitching. I might have to do the stab method. And then when I get to the long stretches, I'll be able to go back to the sewing method. You just want to make sure that you're actually going through both pieces and all the way to the back, and not catching anything extra. And then I'm just going to carry on. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up so you don't have to watch it all, but you can still see it. I had to be careful because I started making my stitches just a little bit smaller there. So I had to just pay a little bit more attention to what I was doing. So when I get down all the way around on both sides of this cuff and I just have the top opening left over, then I'm going to go ahead and take some of my fiber fill. If you don't have any of this pillow stuffing or the toy stuffing, you can go ahead and you could shred up pieces that you've already cut off and stuff it with the felt. You can just rip apart some of your batting scraps that you have left over. You can use cotton balls. Now I don't like to put too much stuffing in. I like it to be squeezably soft. Put a little bit down into the fingertips. I don't pack it in hard. I'm pushing it down just so that it gets down there, but it's still, this whole section is what I was putting in. Take a little bit. Sometimes you might have to take a pencil or something and just to get it into the thumb. There we go. And just add a little bit more to fill out the top. Then I just check, kind of give it a little bit of a squishability to see how it feels. And I'll stitch the top. Now if I want to put my hanger on here, maybe I might just go ahead and take this piece of floss that I already have. I might make a little knot. Go back in again. You can add a totally separate piece, or you can use the one you already have here. So there's about my hanger's length, you know, a couple, 3 inches, however I like. Let me see, one. It's about 2.5 inches long. I'll go through and I'll make another knot. Hold my hanger out of the way. Now that'll keep the hanger from pulling out. So now I have that little hanger. You can stitch a piece of ribbon in there. You could put, like I said, a separate piece of floss. And I'm just going to go back and try to stay out of that white. You're just pushing it out of the way. And then when you come back up, you're just kind of going in between the orange and the white. See that? Tuck that tail in. Okay, now I'm going to take this one to the back. See, I have a little bit of a stitch left over from that last one I just did. I'm going to grab that one so I can tie this off and just stick it inside. Make sure I didn't come through. Again, I'll give it a little pull so there's some tension on it. Cut it off and pop it back. You can see just the littlest of a knot there, but it's really not noticeable. And there's my little mitten ornament. So that's this week's felt mitten ornaments. Next week, I think we'll go ahead and do some Christmas trees. What do you think? Thanks for hanging out with me today in the craft room. I hope you guys find some time to make some ornaments before Christmas. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.